Monster Hunter Wilds was admittedly my most anticipated game of 2025. After hundreds upon hundreds of hours in Monster Hunter World, I was so ready for the next mainline game. The hype was immense and the trailers were so good you could cry, with proof of a hero blasting in the background, setting us up for another amazing next chapter in the Monster Hunter franchise. Then the open betas came around. Everyone was free to jump into this new wild world to do some exploring and square up against a couple of monsters, including the flagship monster itself, Arkveld. Now this is where the cracks started to show. Despite the monsters being pretty fun to fight, the performance simply wasn't the best. The game wasn't running super smoothly for many players, especially PC players, but hey, it was open beta. This is all going to be fixed before release, we told ourselves. Oh, how wrong we were. Now before I segue into this next part, if you want extra videos, unscripted thoughts, podcast episodes, or just to help me keep this channel running, then my Patreon's down in the sticky comment below. For only $5 a month, you get access to everything I upload over there, so hey, if you enjoy my content, then well, you'll simply get access to more. Alright, that's enough shilling for today. Now, February 2025 rolls around. The day is here. Monster Hunter Wilds is available to everyone for a hefty price tag of $70. Steam's player count rockets to 1,179,869
Nice.
players all playing Wilds at the same time, shattering the subsequent player count of any Capcom game in history. The game was already a major success. Every gamer and their grandmother were playing it, but then the hype bubble burst. Many players started realizing that the performance still hadn't been fixed. Frame rates were still dipping, textures weren't loading properly. Turns out the performance issues in the betas were still present in the full game. A tidal wave of players left their reviews on Steam, and pretty much all of them pointed out the game's horrible optimization. One review said, "This game is absolutely amazing, but has the worst optimization I've ever seen. I understand that new games are becoming more demanding and people are expected to upgrade, but this is absurd. I'm aware this isn't the first instance of new games having poor performance on launch, because the same thing happened with World, but it feels inexcusable at this point. I am by no means saying that the game is bad, but in its current state, you should probably consider waiting for a more stable release." Capcom, of course, were quick to work on the game's performance, but despite a couple of fixes here and there, they still haven't been able to completely fix the game's performance. And we'll get back to that later. At any rate, like that Steam review said, the performance was awful, but the game was amazing, right? Well, it would turn out that Wilds had another problem, one that became the focal point of discourse surrounding the game throughout the better part of the year. And that was the difficulty. Or a lack thereof. You see, Monster Hunter World was a game that became known for being notoriously difficult. Even the first quote-unquote real monster you fought, Anjanath the fire-breathing T-Rex, actually stonewalled many new players, including myself when I first tried it. I struggled for hours against this guy, but once I overcame him, I found myself having a ravenous hunger for an even greater challenge, and oh, did Monster Hunter World provide. With each monster faced, that hunger grew greater, and even if I was satisfied with each new encounter, I just couldn't wait for the next monster to demolish me all over again. I think this is a mindset most fans have, especially the millions of people that became fans of the Monster Hunter franchise through World. World proved, just like Dark Souls before it, that most gamers demand a real challenge, because the exhilaration that comes through victory against a difficult encounter is something you just can't replicate through anything else. And World had that in droves, so much so that it became common for new players to complain about the difficulty, and Capcom listened. You see, one thing that became apparent to many returning fans is that Wilds just simply doesn't pose much of a challenge at all. And I'm not just talking about starter monsters like Chatacabra or Kematrice. I'm talking Balahara, Ajarakan, Doshaguma, Nerskilla, and even the Lord of Lightning himself, Rei Dao, and every other monster that comes before and after. But what was it actually that made the monsters so much easier than before? Well, it has been endlessly debated on what actually makes them feel weaker, and Capcom has not outright confirmed that they made them less powerful, like giving the base monsters less health or such, but what we do know is that Wilds introduced a ton of new systems that elevate the hunter to new levels of strength. First of all, the wound system. If you damage a body part enough, you'll soon enough wear it down to where it creates a wound on the monster. You then have the ability to pop that wound with Focus Strike, which deals massive damage and stun locks the monster. This system, while cool, means you can dispatch even the biggest of monsters pretty efficiently as long as you use your Focus Strike. And if you specialize into Flayer, you can easily create wounds over and over again, meaning you can stun lock monsters quickly and dish out even more damage. Then we have mobility. Compared to World, Wild's movement system is definitely smoother and more streamlined, and your hunter is way more athletic this time around, with every weapon class allowing you to move around much more compared to World. The bow, for example, gives you the ability to blink through monster attacks if you time it right, which also instantly charges your bow, making your shots even more powerful. Dual blades can also blink through attacks and completely ignore damage, again setting you up to deal even more damage as you get up and close to the monster, and so on. The introduction of the Sacred is also a big one, as not only can you use it to go from one side of the map to the other, it literally also works as a mobile armory, allowing you to switch between weapons and even serving as a get-out-of-jail-free card whenever you find yourself in a sticky situation. So while the monsters themselves maybe aren't necessarily weaker, they do feel that way because the hunter has in comparison become overpowered. Unlike World, the real danger isn't the monsters, it's your hunter. But why? Why did Capcom flip the script this time around? Why would they introduce new systems that makes your character stronger by default and then not balance the monsters accordingly? Well, here we actually do have some quotes from Capcom. Yu Yu Tokuda, the director for WoW, said this on the PlayStation blog. The real merit of focus mode is to help players in their positioning and distancing, so that even players not as experienced with action games have an easier time honing in their attacks. He then stated in an interview with RPG Site, "We don't want people to quit. The puzzle was how to balance the depth while making it so players don't feel the game pushing back against them." And in another interview with Game Reactor, he said, "I always try and balance any new feature, not making it strictly for hardcore fans and not making it only useful to beginners. Focus mode is useful if you're a beginner finding positioning difficult." Now, while Mr. Tokuda specifically talks about focus mode for most of these interviews, he does imply that the Monster Hunter team wanted to make the game more accessible to beginners, and even if I would have preferred a more difficult base game, I do understand why they did this. You see, the blowback to World's difficulty was pretty large, and going by the director's previous words, a fair chunk of players probably quit because they found World too difficult.
Fuck this shit, I'm out. Nope.
Even if the numbers seem to say otherwise, with over 40% of players actually managing to finish World's main campaign. But in any case, this time around, Capcom tried to balance the game by not necessarily making the monsters themselves weaker, but by making your hunter stronger by introducing better gameplay systems that makes you feel less clumsy and more effective. To put it simply, your DPS uptime is much higher than in World. The end result is that while beginners may appreciate this, veterans like me and maybe you and countless other Monster Hunter fans felt like the game is a cakewalk, and as such it became a total bore. For that reason, I simply uninstalled the game after finishing the main story because I didn't find much joy in it anymore.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
I appreciated the new systems, but there was nothing there that could sufficiently stimulate that need I had for a challenge. And I think that's represented in the player charts on Steam, where we see a sharp drop-off and only smaller spikes happening whenever a new monster was added. But hold on, what's that? After months of sinking player counts, September 29 saw a relatively big spike with over 127,000 players jumping onto the game again. Well, just like they did in World with the addition of the Behemoth, Capcom once again did a collaboration with Square Enix, and this time another boss encounter from Final Fantasy XIV was added in the form of Omega. So, as a fan of Final Fantasy XIV and as someone who absolutely loves the Omega encounter, this was the shot I needed. And so after a weekend of playing, how would I rate this? Well, let's just say that I've carded so many times that I think the only time this happened was when I first started facing off against Alatreon in World. I'm gonna be real with you guys, after absolutely wrecking every single monster in this game up to this point, including the DLC monsters Mizitsune, Seregios, and even Lagiacruz, I was so sure that Omega was just gonna be another disappointment. But let me tell you, it is not. Because you see, as I'm writing this script, I still haven't managed to beat it. If it's not me that's carding, it's someone else, and if it's not someone else, it's me. And soloing Omega is just entirely out of the question. It's got all the moves from Final Fantasy XIV, but dialed up to 11. The Monster Hunter team really went, "Oh, you want difficulty? We'll show you difficulty, you fucking crybabies," and here we are. This is what Monster Hunter Wilds so desperately needed. An encounter that slams your ass so hard that you almost feel like venting about it on Reddit. Actually, there's already tons of threads complaining about Omega being too hard. Just like the good old days. Now this is Monster Hunter at its peak. After months and months of waiting, the Monster Hunter team finally started cranking out a real challenge for every player to sink their teeth into. And if they keep this up, this may very well make a dent in the overwhelmingly negative Steam reviews, because you see, the game's performance is still, well, shit. As much as I love the Omega encounter, the game still struggles to play smoothly to such an extent that even with frame generation on, I'm still getting slowdowns and frame rates that dip when too much stuff is happening on screen. Now, let me remind you, I have an RTX 4090 graphics card, a top-of-the-line 7950X3D CPU, and 64 gigs of RAM. I clear Cyberpunk 2077 on full path tracing without any issue. My PC should not struggle with Monster Hunter Wilds in any way whatsoever, but it does. And so here we are. The Monster Hunter team has finally made me interested in playing Wilds again. I'm having fun, and I can't wait for GOG Mazios and every other upcoming monster. That said, I can't imagine how fucking frustrating it is for players who do not have my setup. I am able to enjoy this game because I spent every last penny of my savings a few years ago to acquire a monster of a PC, which, in retrospect, was probably not a financially smart move. But if I hadn't, I probably would have been one of those players on Steam leaving a red review, because the performance is absolutely inexcusable for a game that still costs you $70. It's incredibly unfortunate that we now have two big mainline titles from Capcom that's been released in a catastrophic technical state. The other being Dragon's Dogma 2, which again is a game I greatly enjoy and in some aspects absolutely adore, but Capcom still hasn't found a way to fix the game's performance, and it's only due to the saving grace of my PC that I've been able to enjoy these games. At the end of the day, Monster Hunter Wilds is a game that, while finally living up to its predecessor in terms of challenge and fun factor, at least for now, it's a game that I just cannot fully recommend yet, because if you can't even play it and enjoy it fully, well then what the hell is the point in buying it? I also want to bring up that while I originally recommended Wilds when it released, I wasn't aware of just how bad the performance would turn out to be for everyone else. And I wasn't sure on whether the lower difficulty was just my perception due to being a long-time World veteran. And as such, when it's all said and done, it turns out that all these problems have been pretty universal, which, well, sucks. At any rate, if you have a powerful PC or if you're playing on console, then, well, yeah, I'd recommend jumping into it now. If the game still runs terrible on your end, you still have a refund window of 2 hours on Steam. Anyway, thank you for watching, and thank you to all my wonderful Patreon members for your support. Azinator, Spectre Forever, Zeramoth, Kaspar Surna, Jennifer McPhail, and every other Patreon. You're all just really Really cool. Have a great day, everyone. Mr. Olton signing off.